This is a little bit about the turners of Kirkleatham. A chap called John Turner came to manage the alum mines for the Challoners, who were lords of the manor at Gisborough. He married a girl called Elizabeth Coulthurst from Bleatham. They had 4 kids, and it was him who bought the manor of Kirkleatham in 1623 and set about building a hall. And they had 4 children. They moved into the hall in about 1634. One of these children was William Turner. He was born in 1615 at Gisborough. And he went down to London and made a fortune as a woolen merchant. A huge fortune as a woolen merchant. He was knighted by Charles II, and he became Lord Mayor of London at one time. And it was him who had the almshouses built at Kirkleatham for, I think it was for 10 poor men, 10 poor women, 10 poor girls and 10 poor boys who lived there. And of course it's still there. Wonderful building, grade 1 listed building. But he had no children, and when he died in I think it was about 1692, his estate passed to his great nephew, a lad called Cholmondeley Turner. He was only 8 at the time, and in the terms of the will, he was left 5,000 quid, which was again an absolute fortune, on condition that he served an apprenticeship in London. If he failed to do this, there were conditions attached to it. Needless to say, he didn't complete his apprenticeship and had to fulfil these instructions, one of which was to build a free school on the site of what was the old Kirkleatham manor. And it's still there, situated opposite the almshouses. This was opened in 1709. Anyway, the school gradually faded into oblivion, and eventually Cholmondeley's brother moved in there, a chap called Charles Turner. He moved in there. Cholmondeley Turner and his missus had 2 children. One was Marwood William, and while he was on the Grand Tour, which most of these young aristocrats did, he died very young. And so when Cholmondeley died, the estate passed to his nephew, Charles Turner. And he continued the expansion of the estate, and I think it was him who built the sort of what was called a model village at Yerby, and it would seem that some of the houses in Yerby were used to house villagers from Kirkleatham who had been displaced by all these modifications and buildings. And Charles married a woman called Teresa Newcomen, but he died very young, in 1810, and everything was bequeathed to his widow, Lady Turner as she was now called, and she was a wealthy widow. And she married a fella called Henry Vansittart in 1812, only a couple of years after becoming a widow. And they only had one child, a woman called Teresa Vansittart, who then married another newcomer, a fellow called Arthur. And they had 4 kids, 4 children. I've got their names written down here somewhere. Yeah. Arthur, Charles, Teresa, and the youngest was a woman called Eveline. She didn't die until 1939. Anyway, through some, probably through the female line, it eventually, the last descendant, married a fella called Leroy Lewis in 1950. And they moved south. The Leroy Lewis family seemed to be based in Hampshire. And the whole place was then divided up and auctioned off. And the whole was bought by a company called Autumn Estates, ORTM Estates. They were property developers. And the woodland was all sold off and all the big trees were chopped down and used for timber. But eventually it was all taken over by a local authority. And the free school is now a museum, and very nice too. Where the hall was, it was demolished in 1953, I can remember that. It's now a special school, and the grounds are more or less open up to the public now. You can wander around, and the stable block, which was falling into rack and ruin, has suddenly had vast amounts of money spent on it. It looks rather nice, although what they're going to do with it, I have no idea. I don't suppose they know either. Anyway, that's a brief description of the Turner family and their ascent and their demise. So we just have a look at Kirkleatham and how, as it was and how I remember it. So this is Kirkleatham Hall. And this is what was known as the King's House, and you can see it's quite a substantial place there. It was originally for staff in the gardens and in the hall and in the grounds. But later on it had more of a community use, and the older villagers in Lazenby I can remember going there for dances. The other interesting thing is, here's a little post office, and absolutely no evidence of that whatsoever now. And this little temple here was had a sort of pineapple finial on the roof. I remember it was a ruin. And all this lot was demolished in about 1953, 1954. The other interesting thing to notice is that there is no entrance here. Where the big entrance is now, there's no entrance there whatsoever. And these, of course, are the stables. This is a lithograph of Kirkleatham Hall with its crenellations. The whole of the outside was rendered and painted. It wasn't a particularly attractive building. This is Kirkleatham Hall in its heyday, at its best. And I suspect that that coat of arms there is the Newcomen coat of arms. It's certainly not the Turner coat of arms. I can remember being inside this several times as a lad, when the place was empty. This is looking from the east. At the other end there was a flat, and just before I became acquainted with the place, a lady lived in the flat. It was quite modern. It had a sort of modern tiled fireplace inside, I remember. Now who this woman was, I don't remember, but whether she was the last descendant of the Turners and Newcomens, I don't know. But she married a fella called Leroy Lewis, and they moved down south, and that was the place was then empty. Anyway, it was sold off, and you couldn't do anything with it really. A property company bought it, and they set about demolishing it. I can remember them. I remember standing on the roof as a lad when they chopped the lead up. They just used felling axes to do it, and then dropped it off the blooming front here into a big lorry. And the whole place, that was it. It had gone. It had some interesting plasterwork, but more interesting was, especially the young lads, was on the top floor there. You can see those windows. There were cupboards in there, and drawn on the back of two of these cupboards were two nudes. I suspect they were done by somebody in the army, but he obviously had an artistic talent, and he obviously had an eye for the female form. Where they went to, I have no idea, but he was obviously a talented artist, this fella, whoever he was. It's worth going to the museum at Kirkleatham. They have a great mass of information about Turners and their estate, and some nice books being produced. They also have, I think, the catalogue for when this was all sold off, which I've never actually been to see or to look at. This is the main salon or gallery in Kirkleatham Hall as I remember it. And this wonderful plaster ceiling, and but the place was going to rack and ruin. A terrible mess. This was shortly before it was demolished. All that rubbish there, you can see it falling down the chimney. This is another gallery. This is right at the east end. You can see those windows on the postcard of Kirkleatham Hall. I mean, look at that wonderful door there on the left. Tremendous thing. And it had a wonderful strip floor. I don't know, I wonder what happened to all these things when the place was demolished. I seem to remember that a whole lot was just shoveled away into trucks and taken off. It was a great shame, but it would have needed an absolute fortune to spend on it. I mean, today it would probably have been luxury flats. So this is the entrance to Kirkleatham Halls, with the Turner lion on the top there, which was in fact the lion badge for the school he founded, which is round the corner. We'll go and have a look at it later.
which became Sir William Turner's or Courtham Grammar School. So you've got these wonderful gate posts, but the gates opposite the church used to have sort of large balls on the top, which somebody seems to have filched, unfortunately. So this is one of the follies in grounds of Kirkleatham Hall. If I just turn round, this is the east side of the stables. They're a great 2-star listed building, and last time I was here they were in absolute ruins, but it's nice to see that the brickwork and stonework has all been pointed up, and what they'll use it for I have no idea. It's an impressive building that was just for horses. So this is where Calvert's racehorse trainer Jack Calvert lived. They lived here when I was a kid. I remember coming here for parties and to run wild round Kirkleatham Hall estate, and it's been boarded up for years now, although it has at some time been re-roofed. This is a view of the Kirkleatham Hall stables from the air when they were in an absolutely terrible mess. I don't know when this would be taken, but I suspect it was probably taken in the 1990s. These are the Kirkleatham Hall stables. This was taken about 2001. They had been renovated, but since that renovation, again, they just fell into disrepair. I don't think the local authority who had bought them, I don't think they knew what to do with them, but they are Grade 1 listed buildings, or perhaps Grade 2-star listed buildings, and therefore I suspect whilst they want to demolish them, it's obviously not allowed. But this is where, in my time, Mr. Jack Calvert trained racehorses before he moved eventually to the top of Sutton Bank at Hambleton. And when I was a kid, they were in a terrible state. I took this photograph about, I think it was 2000, 2001. You couldn't actually get into the yard. It was blocked off at both ends, but here you can see the state of disrepair. Although some repairs had been carried out, it was nevertheless in a bit of a mess. So this is the Kirkleatham Hall stable block in 2013. And it seems as if all the stonework has been renovated, certainly on the front. So this is inside the yard, and again, it's all been lovingly restored. You can't actually get in because it's got great big lock gates on either side, but it's got new roof, chimneys. Everything's all been pointed up beautifully. Downcomer's all done. The yard has been thoroughly cleared and rubbish taken away. So, I assume they got lottery money for it. But they have made a good job. This is a temple, as I remember it, opposite King's House. It was just the bottom of Yerby Bank, where your big gate is. It was just on the left there, and it had this pineapple finial up here on the top, and it was quite ornate inside. It was quite. I mean, the windows were lovely, albeit all smashed. But it was quite ornate inside. Anyway, it was demolished at the same time as or shortly after the hall disappeared.
This is Turner's Free School, which was built, I think it was 1709, and these are the almshouses. They were built for, on this side, 10 single women to stay in, and on this side it was for 10 single men. And the school was for 10 boys and 10 girls to attend. And it ran very well for a few years, but in the 1850s or thereabouts, the charity commissioners decided that it was more or less finished, and instructed the Newcomen family, who had inherited Kirkleatham Hall. They were instructed to set up a new school down at Cotham in Redcar, which became Cotham Grammar School.
And this is the what was called then the Old Hall, but it was built as a free school. This is the thing that was built by Cholmondeley Turner in 1709 under the instructions of his great uncle Sir William Turner. And when I was a lad, on the left hand side there was a family called Bosanquet lived, and on the left hand side, looking at the photograph, it was used by a furniture removal firm, Hartgroves from Redcar, and they use it as quite simply as storage. Mr. Bosanquet eventually bought the lot. But when he died, it was eventually bought by the local council, who have since converted it into a museum. And this is a photograph of the Bosanquet family. Mrs. Bosanquet, Esther, was quite interesting because she was the daughter of Grover Cleveland, who was the President of the United States. And she was born in the White House in 1893. She was lucky to have survived because she had severe bouts of measles and also had diphtheria in her childhood. William, her husband, he had been in the Coldstream Guards, had an exemplary record in the First World War. But he was the managing director or manager of Skinning Grove Steelworks. And he had a rather nice motor, I remember it, a sage green Cyclops Rover, which he used to cruise about in. He died in 1966, and on his death certificate it had him down as a market gardener, so he'd obviously, I think, retired from the steelworks, taken up market gardening. And when he died, Esther, his wife, she cleared off back to the United States, where she died in 1980. They were married in Westminster Abbey. I mean, he came from a very gentrified family, did Mr. Bosanquet. And that's one of their daughters. They had two. I think one was called Marion and another one called Philippa or Pippa. And she became Philippa Foote, who was a philosopher. And I think that's her there. And she died in 2010. Where the other one went to, I haven't the faintest idea. But there's a little plaque in the church to the family. I don't think it would have been there if she hadn't been a daughter of the President of the United States, but anyway, by the by. So this is the the school that was founded by Sir William Turner. Although according to that up there it says it was Cholmondeley Turner. I'll get a close-up of it in a minute. It's nicely done and it's well maintained, and it's exactly as it is now. It used to have a horrible Victorian extension on the back which they pulled down. It's now a museum. You can read that. So these are the almshouses built by Sir William Turner. I think it was 1676. You can see his coat of arms up there, which became the coat of arms of the school which he set up, which became Sir William Turner's Kirkleatham Grammar School. It continues to this day. When there's a vacancy, I think they advertise it. And it has that clock up there, which is just has one pointer on it. This is on a plaque just outside the almshouses at Kirkleatham. If you go to Yarm, there's a plaque on the wall of a house there on the right hand side as you go towards the bridge. This is another one of these sandstone follies all round the estate. This is just outside the almshouses, as you can see there, in 2013. Here you can see a little dovecote, or pigeon cote as you call it there. And I can remember that being there as a lad. It was more or less intact. And it just sat in the middle of the fields, and inside were hundreds and hundreds of little alcoves for pigeons to nest in, and they used to go and collect the eggs, and young pigeons, which are called squabs, which I understand are quite tasty, but I've never tried one. And it also had a ladder arrangement which rotated, so you could climb this ladder and reach these alcoves all the way around. And it too was demolished. It was demolished, I think, after the hall was demolished. This is Kirkleatham in 1953, just before everything changed in a major way. The estate had been sold off by this time. So here you can see the King's house is a much diminished thing. Just that little bit was left, and I can remember that. There, it was in a pretty poor state. The temple, again, it was in a pretty poor state. But you can see that opposite the church there, they've put this big entrance in, which is the entrance where you can go in now, although this is all demolished and is now a special school, but the stables are all still there. But you'll notice there's no post office. That's gone. But the fish ponds are still here. As is the dovecote. It is still there as well. These are all the little weirs which were there primarily to oxygenate the water. And these were the hall gardens, now in a terrible state. These buildings here are just piles of bricks really, although the wall right round has recently been done up. This is from the 1857 map. You can see Yerby there. And if I just move up here,
follow the road anyway, and then come across. This is Park House here, and there was a keeper's lodge there. When I was a kid, I remember it. All the stones were still there, although it had been demolished. And you see that little spring there, and this is where this cascade was. It was called the Neptune Cascade and Fountain. This is what remains of the Neptune Cascade and Fountain, which is in the woodland just to the west of Park Farm at the top of Yerby Bank. On the old maps there's a keeper's cottage there, but when I was a kid it was just a pile of stones. There was nothing left of it. But when Turners had visitors, they used to take them up here to see this, and the estate workers used to have to get it ready. It wasn't working all the year round, so they used to have to fill the pond up, and there was a lead pipe led through to the cascade itself, and when the visitors arrived they would release the water, which would then pour down the cascade into the beck at the bottom. It was around about 2000. It was all cleared off, and you could see all the evidence of it. You could see the cascade steps and the pond, which you can see there on the photograph. And now it's completely overgrown again. But it is surrounded by these nice yew trees, and there's also some nice stonework there as well. But again, it's all overgrown. But it's not difficult to find. You could find it quite easily. This is the remains of the ice house. People used to think it was part of the mines, but it wasn't. It was the ice house for Kirkleatham Hall. It was on the north-facing slope of the woods above Yerby. It's still there. This was taken in 2009. A chap from South Bank, I can't remember his name now, who'd sort of fallen on hard times. He was living in it for a while. It must have been absolutely dreadful. And I think his mother lived in Yerby. Anyway, he was moved out of here, but he quite simply meandered across to Yerby, and he was living in a makeshift shelter in a little track leading up to a field, living under a pile of tarpaulins and in the hedge. I don't know what happened to him, but I suspect he died there. It was, this is the Turner Arms farm. Of course, the bypass goes across here now. And in these fields here, then, in 2013, June 2013, they are about to build a crematorium . Well, this is at the bottom of Yerby Bank. The wind is blowing straight into the camera, so I don't know if you can hear this, but there's activity on this site here, right at the bottom by the corner, which I understand is to be the new crematorium. There's the road down to Fishponds Corner. During the war there was great worries that Tees Bay, with its big sandy beaches and sand dunes, would be used or would be invaded by the Axis forces, This was the Second World War. And Kirkleatham Hall was taken over by the army, as were huge numbers of these large houses. And these are all the various fortifications around the place. These were minefields, and these were tank traps. These are all machine gun posts. And here, next to East Lodge, there's a gun mount, or a mount for a mortar. It's like a little bronze spigot, which is still there. This is a folly in the wall at Kirkleatham Hall, one of the originals. It was converted into a pillbox during the war. I think there's 2 or 3 of these things. Now it's all sealed off, you can't get in, but at least it's been looked after. They've tidied it up and put some support around the back so stop it falling in half. And just at the gate at the east end of Kirkleatham Hall parkland, just by East Lodge, there's this great lump of concrete behind the wall, on top of which there is a mount for, it's like a spigot for mounting. I think it was a mortar. And it's obviously made from some kind of bronze. On a cast iron plate. It's not corroded at all. A relic of the Second World War. When Kirkleatham Hall was taken over by the army, because we were worried about German invasion of Tees Bay. This is a sound mirror in Redcar. When I was a kid, it used to be right in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of some fields somewhere, miles from anywhere. Now it's in the middle of a housing estate, but it's nice to see that they've preserved it. When we were kids, we used to think it was for some kind of game. No information about it at all. But it explains on this little plaque what it was all about, which is quite fascinating. It's a sizable structure, and it must be about 12 feet high. And it's this is 2013, so it's rapidly approaching its centenary, and it's in a good state of preservation.